navigate the paradox of leaving behind what you've created while stepping into what's next. Today, we'll explore how to turn exits into opportunities for purpose, fulfillment, and lasting impact. Welcome to Beyond the Quo. I'm Stacey Luces, and today's episode is all about transitions and those pivotal moments when we leave behind one chapter and step into another. My guest, Jerome Myers, welcome, Jerome, is a seasoned...
Stacey, we're here.
I know. He is a seasoned entrepreneur, an exit strategist. I totally love that. We'll get all into that. And the founder of Exodus. And he helps leaders redefine success and build legacies that outlast them. From creating a $20 million division for a Fortune 550 company to navigating his own exits, Jerome is going to bring powerful insights on how to lead yourself with clarity, authenticity, and courage through life's biggest challenge. Jerome, super excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm excited to be
Yay.
here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
When I got the LinkedIn thing, I was like, she's going to let me come on her podcast? This is phenomenal. So it's good to be here.
I love that. And I was just telling Jerome before we started, I was a bit nervous because he's done so many of these, and this is like my, fourth or fifth, but totally appreciate your vibe and so forth. So before we started recording, we were chatting a little bit about the Matrix. And I'm really deeply sorry for people listening to this who don't know what that is, but we are definitely fans. And it's been decades since that trilogy came out. And I can't wait to really explore with you how you've taken the concepts and sort of the textures of that movie and those theories and that push the limits of what's beyond the status quo. And you took it to a whole nother level. Before we start, though, in the essence of the Matrix, if your journey, Jerome, of building, exiting, and redefining success was a scene in the Matrix, and you were a character in the Matrix, whether it's Neo or Morpheus or whomever, who would you be, and what would that scene look like?
Man, there's so much context that I could add in to answer this question. What I would say is we all have main character energy.
Yes.
At times.
I love that.
And so I would need to be Neo to answer this question. And then the scene is when he wakes up on the table.
Yeah.
After getting the download of the information and stepping into the space of what's next for him.
I just got full ass chills. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
That's the game, right? Because I think every transition is littered with the new download, the fast learning curve, seeing the world in a new way.
Yeah.
And really, when you look back, it's not what you thought it was. It's almost like you're looking through a portal. And so when we talk about transitions, we want people to step through the portal and experience the life on the other side.
Yeah. And, when I thought about so many themes and directions for this podcast, Beyond the Quo was sort of, when I left corporate, I said that. I said I was leaving the Matrix. And people that get that, because on some visceral level, you are walking away from everything you've been conditioned, taught, trained almost to accept, right? That we work 9 to 5 and we have 2 or 3 hours for ourselves and we work till we're 60 something and then we retire to have a few good years. And in between there, you've got a few kids or whatever. And that's it, right? And everybody kind of accept that, except for the ones that don't. And those people... Yes.
Blue pill poppers.
Yeah.
They will argue for their limitations. They won't be looking for leverage. They will be upset with you for doing the things that they don't do.
Yeah.
And it's very uncomfortable for people who are moving into what I call the desert, right? It's a barren land. The resources aren't rich and plenty. The file cabinet isn't stocked when you leave that space and you become chief everything officer.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to clean and take out the trash. Somebody's got to sell it. Somebody's got to fulfill it, and somebody's got to bill it. And I'll be honest, a lot of people aren't prepared to experience that once they've had the the benefit of sitting in well-defined processes and clear job descriptions and people who are taking care of things, being in infrastructure, as I like to
Yeah.
characterize it.
Yeah.
You know, and that infrastructure looks very much like a jungle where this stuff is plentiful and there's predictability on whether or not you're going to have a meal. When you come out in the desert, it's tough, and many people turn back, and sometimes they turn back too late and they're not able to make it back into the jungle. But for those adventurous few who do walk out into the desert and they find their oasis and they get some rest and they get some refreshing and then they continue that journey.
Try
If
a
they
few
make it
different
across the desert
cuisines.
and into paradise, it's a
Right?
totally different
I love it.
experience.
So we jumped way ahead of ourselves in the sense of just excited about this conversation. But in this episode, when I sort of read your bio and did a little bit of research on you and kind of what you do in the world and who you are, and we have tangentially known each other for, I want to say, a year and a half, almost 2 years. We were introduced by Matt Holleran. I was on his podcast, and he said, you have to meet Jerome. He has a similar story to you, and I would venture to say he said the same to you. And one of the things that really struck me as I, dove a little bit into your website and so forth is the way that you've taken this complex emotional and psychological almost journey that a business and a founder goes through when exiting, right? And you talk a lot, even when when we first explored what to talk about, this founder's exit paradox, and this way that we mix our identity, our significance, our sometimes it seems the very DNA of who we are with what we do. And when we are confronted with this does not serve me anymore, in whatever way, shape, or form that comes about, there is this cognitive dissonance and this fear, for some people almost paralyzing, in terms of ignoring the signs until you get a mountain thrown on top of your head, or you ignore it and things detonate slowly, right? And there's this slow erosion of everything, or you kind of self-sabotage. I'm sure you've seen all of it, but I want you to kind of share your personal story about what led you to kind of, to go back to what we started with the Matrix. What happened to you personally that led you to exit and sort of do your own thing and help other people kind of navigate differently?
Yeah. So I had what I consider to be a traumatic experience. And the interesting thing about trauma is it's the person that experiences the event that determines whether or not it's trauma. But it was this time of year, and it's happening right now all over the country.
Yeah.
People are doing layoffs. For me, I went through 2009 unimpacted, career still on a rocket ship. And now it's 2015. I just built a team of 175 people over the course of the year. We just hit $20 million in revenue.
Yeah.
We just realized that we had 30% profits. And on December 24th at 4:55, I get a phone call and it says, "Hey, Jerome, we're gonna lay off half the team."
Wow.
And I said, "No, we're not. That's not the right idea." And he said, "You and I have been going back and forth about this, but I've made a decision on what we're going to do."
Yeah.
Now, this is a person that I saw once a quarter and talked to every other week, telling me what was going to happen with my team.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that. I was like, this is wrong. Like, we made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Why would we do something like this? Long story short, he hung up on me because I wanted to debate and it wasn't a negotiation. I was being informed of a decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I spent that week putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. I was like, well, who's going to go? Who's going to take over for the things that the resources or the talent that we're sending out the door? And in the new year, we announced who was not going to be on the team anymore.
Wow.
And it was crushing for me.
Yeah.
And I promised myself that I would never do that again. And the way that I got through it was by saying, they made me do it. Right? This isn't what I want to do. They're making me do it. And that sounded good. But what I realized in hindsight is I was giving away my agency. And so I promised I would never do it again, and I wanted to be in the um in a space where the buck stopped with me.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of the end. And
Mm-hmm.
so we went through another year, another 20 million, smaller team,
Mm-hmm.
lean and
Mm-hmm.
mean, still super profitable.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Thanksgiving this time, and it was a couple of days before. I said, "Hey guys, don't spend all your money on Black Friday. I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year."
Yeah, yeah.
And
Because
I
you
just
already,
felt all my leadership
you already
credibility
saw
ooze
that
out on the
movie.
floor.
You already saw that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So all my leadership credibility oozed out on the floor. I was like, I can't do this anymore because
wow.
it's not my decision. When
For
I
sure.
realized it wasn't my call, because it felt like it was my call,
Mm-hmm.
because there was nobody to tell me what to do.
Well,
But
they were
when I
comfortable
realized,
when you made the calls that made them the 20 mil, right? Like,
yeah. Don't tell anybody that though, because
I won't. It'll
we
just
got to
be
keep up appearances,
our
right?
secret
But
and maybe the 4 people, including my husband, that listens to this podcast right
yeah, I don't know. I think this thing is going to be super big. Um,
now. So tell me how personally, right? Personally, and how did this bleed out into Jerome the human and less so Jerome the leader?
so Jerome the human didn't eat for a
Mm,
week.
yeah.
Jerome the human got the phone call that said, "Hey, that guy that did the thing
Mm,
couldn't find another job. His family left.
mm,
Then the after the car got repossessed,
wow.
and then the house got foreclosed on. So he
Mm,
decided to commit suicide."
yeah.
Jerome was the guy that had the reputation for caring too much.
Mm-hmm.
So the thought that I needed to be less humane,
Yeah.
less interested in the people who were working whenever I asked them to work,
Mm-hmm.
responding whenever I
Yeah.
asked them to respond,
Yeah. Your tribe, right?
didn't
These,
sit.
yeah. Yeah.
It didn't work. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I needed to find a way out so that I could be more of me. I
Mm-hmm.
think many of us want to acclimate and cut off parts of ourselves to fit in.
Sure.
And that wasn't the game. And the more time I spent in entrepreneurship, I realized that you being you is
Mm-hmm.
the thing that the world is seeking.
Yeah.
And there's might not be hundreds of thousands of people that are looking for you,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a group of people who's looking for you, and you solve the problem that they're trying to figure out how to solve,
Mm-hmm.
and you can help them solve their problem in a way that they can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But when they find you,
Yeah.
they're going to be delivered. Very much like Neo finding Morpheus after getting the message of following the
Mm.
right rabbit on Trinity's shoulder.
I want to tell you, in my version of the Matrix, when we met last year, beginning of last year, you were probably Morpheus to my Neo, if I'm the lead character, right? In the sense of you understood what it could look like 5, 10 years out. And I was just unplugged on the table. And I couldn't hear what you were saying. I couldn't process it. All I could process was, I'm so freaking exhausted. It's foggy in here. There's a bad taste in my mouth. And this almost debilitating fear of, did I make the right decision?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that as humans, no one wants to feel that way, period. And to elaborate on that, no one wants to feel that way for an extended period of time. However, we will relive the same day, the same decade in jobs that make us feel that way, where you dread Mondays. You have leaders that, kind of using your story, you give blood, sweat, and tears to, and you become a line item at the end of the year for many corporate agencies. And I, to your point, I've had clients that I coached 2 years ago reaching out to me now because they've been notified that their federal contract or whatever is coming up for expiration. And with the new administration, they're not sure if they're going to have work. And a part of me feels grateful that they know they can trust me and come back to me and we'll work through it. But there's a deeper part of me too that feels a sense of frustration because they almost had a 2-year runway. And this is
and they did
where,
nothing with it.
yes. And here's where I wanna kind of ask you, based on your experience and expertise, how can people who are going through this or have a both as leaders, but both as deep in the matrix that are going to be cut and have no sense of what to do next and feeling that sense of hopelessness and desperation, what could a runway look like for them right now?
So I think you should always be building the next thing.
Yeah.
Very rarely is a job in a large company you living out your purpose.
Yeah.
And so what we would encourage people to do is really do the internal work to get alignment around who they're supposed to be serving and what problem they're supposed to be helping them solve. And then align their activities in a way where they are finding ways to be compensated for doing that work. Now, great. If you can find a company that you can work in and do that work, that's phenomenal. But many times people are in careers or in jobs because those are the doors that open up to them when they were much, much younger. And they just continue down that path, right? Like most companies have a track. And so you're following the track. You're following the career pathway versus
on your core competencies in quotation marks, in air quotes, your core competencies. If I hear this one more time, I'll just like keel over because they're training you for the role. It's not necessarily what lights you up on the inside. If you are, hey, yay. But for the most part, you're right. We're following the script, right? Reading from the script and acting the role.
And I mean, it sounds good until you end up in a space where you're not getting what you wanted out of the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where most people decide to just compromise. They forget what they dreamed of when they were small.
Yeah.
They forget what passion was associated when they started the opportunity. And so, you know, we're trying to get past the quo. And so they live in status quo.
Yeah.
Right. There is no exploration. There is no real excitement. They traded all that for predictability.
For sure. For sure.
And that predictability is a cage, right? It's a prison. And whether you enjoy those words or not, it's meant to be hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you you're in prison, but you just can't see the bars, you really have to take a step back and question, is this guy crazy or am I missing something?
Am I missing something? There was this, it was like a cartoon where there was this beautiful bird. It almost looked like a nightingale with like long, beautiful wings and so forth. And she poked her gorgeous head out of the bars of the cage she was in and wrapped her wings around some of the bars, and she poked her head out and she's watching all the other birds like flying and bemoaning her fate. Bemoaning she's stuck in this cage and nobody cares about her and she can't fly like the other birds and fulfill her dreams. And then the camera pans to the back where the cage door is open. And when I saw that, it was such a simple, emotive construct. But I feel like for the most part, me being out of that cage for the last 2 years, but having thought about it for 10, but waiting for, and I always talk about this, people wait. I waited for the right age. I was like, okay, my kids are going to be XYZ. I'm going to have X number in my account saved up. I want the right resources. Oh my goodness, do I need the right certification? And when I think back, when young people ask me if I'm doing speeches or whatever, like what's the one advice I would give to myself? Start the moment you think it, start. Because it's already in you. And that 10-year runway that I missed, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter how fast I run now.
You didn't miss it, right? Like, at the end of the day.
But I feel like I was waiting to be ready, and people wait till they're ready, and you're never going to be ready.
You're never ready. And the way that you get ready before you're ready is by having a guide come by your side. And that's why the work that you do is so important. You're not going to be confident because you haven't done it.
Yeah.
And so if you look anywhere else in the world, there's either an apprenticeship or some type of coach that's helping people do the stuff that they don't know how to do because you're not going to get it in school. You might get it around the kitchen table if you have a family that's already doing the stuff. And you're moving into the family business. But otherwise, you're relying on your own mistakes or somebody who's helped other people and somebody who's done it, their mistakes.
Yeah.
And for me, the silly part, and I call it silly because I've made the mistake, is knowing that you're smart and then deciding that there's nobody else who can help you on your journey.
Yeah.
You've got to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And so it's the most inefficient and ineffective way to do this because there's no leverage.
Yeah. I will tell you, I still struggle with quote unquote closing a sale. And I got connected to a sales coach. He's super expensive, and that man unlocked within me in 20 freaking minutes something that has changed me. 20 minutes, Jerome. And that is the power, I think, of having that wise guide that has walked the path, understands the obstacles, where the potholes are, where the grenades are, where the, if we're talking video games, I don't play video games personally, but my son does. And I hear him celebrating when he wins whatever the new, unlocks some new level of whatever, weaponry or car accessory or whatever. There's hooping and hollering because the acceleration of having that is unmatched, right? So I want to switch gears a little bit. I listened to one of your podcasts, and like I mentioned, it was a episode where you were solo and you were in a reflective mode, and you were talking about taking your daughters to Hawaii for a vacation. And one of the things that you shared on that episode was losing a friend and having this moment of recalibration where you reconnected with the things important to you. One of them being present for your kids and the ways that could manifest itself. And I think for a lot of us, we think that it's the big things, but you made such a really fantastic point, which was it is the small things. Like I think in your case, it was being punctual to pick them up from school. And tell me a little bit about how you, as a father and as a mentor for kind of the younger generation, how has the changes that you've made and the work that you've done impacted and influenced those big important parts of you?
Yeah, for me, it's just being an open book. What's funny about most people who have whatever you might want to define as success is they only talk about their wins.
Yeah.
And they make it seem like things are perfect or like they don't have any
highlight reel on Instagram.
Or they never had any setbacks.
Yeah.
And I've just never found that to be authentic or helpful.
Yeah.
If I can only learn from what you succeeded at. When I make a mistake, I'm going to feel more inadequate because one, I don't have the success that you have. And then two, I'm going to assume that I'm the only one that's failing.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. So, people who come in my orbit are asking about the things that were most challenging. And I try to do that with the people that I get guidance from. About a year ago, I was having dinner with Damon John in Miami, and he was like, so what do you want to know? I said, I want to know about all the hard stuff. I
Yeah.
want to know about the stuff that you don't want anybody else to know. I want to
Mm.
know about a company being in trouble. I want to know about divorce. I
The
want to know about how
landmines.
you
Yeah.
deal with kids when you're not there every day. Like, tell me
Mm.
about the stuff that was most challenging and how you overcame that stuff, how you
Mm.
navigated, what you would have done differently, like what lessons have you learned over the time.
Mm.
And it was one of the most human interchanges I've ever had with
Yeah.
somebody that's, on TV and
Yeah.
built a multi-million, $100 million brand.
Yeah.
Um, and so I try to mirror that. I want to be
Mm.
that for folks.
Yeah. And I have to tell you that even with me, who we had never met, and sort of Matt, who you're close to, was like, oh, you need to just go talk to this random person. And what I deeply appreciated about you, and I feel like I've shared that, but just to kind of, pin it further, is that throughout the course of the last 2 years, every couple of months you would drop a note just saying, hey, just checking in. How's it going? And there were some days when it just wasn't going. I remember last year I had surgery, major surgery, and that took me out for a couple months. And you reached out a couple months into the recovery. And I almost didn't respond because I was like, what am I supposed to say? Business is I was like, what do I say? And I think I just said, I had surgery and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, all right, I wish you speedy recovery. And when you're ready, like, hop on my calendar. And I just so appreciated the generosity of spirit
Yeah.
in that moment. You know what I mean? So that's
It's
that's
hard.
the sauce,
And I
though.
appreciate you remembering that, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, many people are just there,
Yeah.
from my perspective, many people are just there to pluck from the vine,
Yeah.
right? I consider myself a farmer, though,
Yeah.
right? Like, I want to sow into the world the good that I think needs to be there. And in a world of takers, the
Mm.
givers are the ones that I believe make the world go round.
Yeah.
The takers, the relationship is short lived.
Yeah.
People avoid them because they know that they're going to be drained because these folks are coming to get from them.
Yeah.
And if we can do stuff and show up in a way and be people who
Mm.
are actually pouring into others,
Yeah.
I think it gets really interesting really fast
Yeah.
with the impact that is made
Yeah. And I
from
want
those
to say that
exchanges.
generosity of spirit as a new entrepreneur, me in my full-time entrepreneurness, that generosity of spirit that you extended made me a better entrepreneur, in the sense of I extend that now to people that see me online or whatever and want to have a conversation, or do you know what I mean? I'm more cognizant of that emotion that I felt when you extended that, but also I'm more cognizant of whether it was a big conversation or a 2-minute, texting back and forth. It did move the needle, and I think that's important. That not all interactions are going to be momentous, but it's the quality of the interaction and the timing. And I think if people keep that in mind, just that absolute generosity of spirit, not to be corny, but it will all just feel better. Like it will be a better
I don't think it's
experience.
corny at
Yeah,
all. I think it's really like the human experience.
Yeah.
And, I wish that we didn't have to wait this long for you to say such nice things about me because I had no idea that you were impacted in that way.
Yeah.
So,
It was,
this experience has just gotten so much better for me from the standpoint of
yeah.
knowing that,
Yeah.
it had an impact on you. And not only
It
that,
did.
but the ripple
It
effect
did.
that comes from that. And
And
this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier because I believe that people are supposed to go do the thing because there's somebody else that's waiting on them to do their thing so that they can do their thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like a row of dominoes.
For sure.
So for you who's sitting in that prison
Yeah.
of comfort, you're not doing your thing and there's somebody waiting for you to do your thing so that they can do
Absolutely.
their thing. And you don't know what monumental thing you're holding up
Mm-hmm.
because you're scared
Yeah.
about something that's going to be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You've got 100% track record
For
on
sure.
surviving your worst days up to this point.
Yeah.
And so to think that you're not going to survive whatever the new things are is a bit silly.
Mm.
But I understand that we can live in the reptile brain and avoid
Yeah.
risk and live in fear if we're not careful. But
Mm.
you get the opportunity to choose,
Yes. All
and
the
that's the
time.
magic.
Tell me about with the types of people that you work predominantly with. High achievers, maybe really married to uh, their version of what success feels like, the big title, the income, whatever, the fancy cars, don't know, whatever their version of it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about how you, and in your coaching and in your work, divorce their mind from that place and teach them. And I know you do sort of this holistic coaching where it's different levels and you go into the mind and the spirit and things that we've diluted to stay in the game to some extent. Tell me how hard has that been, not only for the people that you work with, but dovetailing a little bit into Black men, Black women, people of color. Tell me about the difference in, because I know for me, security was everything.
Yeah.
And walking away from six figures and walking away at the pinnacle of my career, I wasn't pissed off or unhappy. It wasn't working anymore. Felt like complete and abject, oh shit, do you even know what you're doing? And I didn't have people to look around to support me in that moment. And so I try to be that person for other people like myself. I'm from Trinidad, I'm an East Indian, right? I mean, I try to find my people because yes, we can help everyone and we do, but tell me about that nuance and what impact you have being who you are and doing the work that you're doing.
Yeah, this is a complicated, layered
For
question.
sure.
So I'm gonna do my best to be
Yeah.
brief and concise. But what I will say is, you asked how hard it is. Well, for me, it's not hard because I see things clearly. If we go back to that example of Neo on the table, right? Neo wakes up and they realize something's different. They don't know, he doesn't know what's different, but he knew that something was wrong, right? And now he wakes up on the backside of the experience and he's like, oh, this is different. It's like I've never seen before.
Yeah.
When people come into my world, they are already seeking. They're looking. And if you're not looking, I'm not going to convince you to go down this path because it's not going to be fun. Like this is something that you wanted to do. And now I'm helping you figure out how to do it. And if you didn't make your mind up beforehand, you're going to change your mind in the middle of it. And so there's that. The funny part about people of color in particular and the ugly history of America and chattel slavery is that many of us are trying to prove to others that we're doing well. And so if we liken this to the plantation and a free person, the person that left the plantation and is free gets laughed at on the people on the plantation if they don't have nicer clothes and are eating better food. It's like, oh, well, you could have just stayed over here on the plantation and not had to worry about that. But the issue is that they haven't experienced freedom. And once you experience freedom, you can't substitute it for anything else.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is many people are wrapped up in the trappings of success because that's what they think you're supposed to do. Unfortunately, for the people who aren't living in purpose and on purpose, they are trying to fill the holes in their soul. And so they're buying the things to make them feel better about what they do on a day-to-day basis to justify why they're blowing out the flame that was placed in their soul in order to go out and do the thing. And so I'm replacing purpose with a thing. You call it a car. I got a new car.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got the bag, and then I got the belt and the shoes, and now I have the jewelry. And everybody's looking at me and they think I'm because this is successful, because this is what a successful person looks like. Until you realize that a truly successful person is going to look at you and they're going to see right through all that. And then they're going to look into your eyes and they're going to see that your soul is empty. And in the empty soul, they're going to realize that you're somebody who's struggling and you need help. And the thing about success that most people don't get is that you can't fool somebody who's more successful than you. You can only fool the people who are less successful than you about your success.
Mm.
So you're putting on this mask, you're putting on this charade for the people who aren't actually able to help you. So let that sink in. I'm going through this effort, spending this money to fool people who aren't the ones who are further ahead than me, to make them believe that things are better than what they actually are, only so that the people who are further ahead of me and can help me get there see me and say things like, I remember when I was
Jerome, I
10.
totally need a margarita after this conversation. You're right. It's a mind, it's a mind fuck.
It is.
It totally
it's
is.
a game.
Yeah.
Right. And so
tell me what
illusion,
not transportation. Tell me what the transformation, because you've seen it happen. Tell me what the transformation could look and feel like for those that are kind of stretching their brains around. Well, what am I getting? Do you know what I mean? They're still really locked into this ROI. Like, what does that transformation look and feel like, especially in our mid years when the number of years in front of us arguably is a lot less than behind us?
So I believe the average age of death for a woman is 78. So that means when you're 39, you're at midlife, right?
Yeah.
So the transformation looks like peace. So our model has 6 levels. The first 3 are all about stress. Self-image, work, or self-image, relationships, and work. Self-image, relationships, and work. This is where all the stress in your life comes from. And if you aren't authentic in yourself and your self-image and truly have a great relationship and accept yourself and keeping promises to yourself and some of the other things that we measure, you're going to have this disconnect. You're going to have this internal conflict, this struggle that's going to keep you unsettled. And so what most people try to do is they put things on top of it so you can't see me. It's the reason why you can't lose the weight, because you're insulating yourself from the things that you think are going to attack you. With relationships, you stay in the toxic relationship because it gives you a sense of steadiness. You know what you're going to get. And oh, by the way, since you're out of integrity with yourself, you can't keep other people and hold them accountable or make them move into integrity with you, because you don't even have a basis. You don't have an anchor to move that from. And so we want people to move in integrity. We want people to treat us the way that we want to be treated.
Yeah.
Not the way that they want to be treated. We want people to treat us the way we want to be treated.
Yeah.
And I think so many people miss that. Like, don't treat me the way you want to be treated. Treat me the way I want to be treated. And then if you can do that and I can reciprocate, the relationship becomes mutually beneficial.
It's harmonious.
And so
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so we've got this thing we call the 2C matrix, where we have people plot their relationship, the 5 people they spend the most time with.
Yeah.
We plot those relationships in this quadrant. We call it the 2C matrix. And so the relationship can either be mutually beneficial, underutilized, uninspiring, or draining. And we don't tell the people what the quadrants are before they do the exercise, because they don't want to label the people in their life in something that's unfavorable. But when they start looking at the results, the majority of people that are in their life are low capacity. And very often, 1 to 2 of the people are also low contribution, and that makes them draining. So imagine 5 people you spend the most time with, 3 of the people are either uninspiring or draining. What does that do for you if you're trying to go to the next level?
Oh my God, it drags you down.
It weighs you down.
Yeah.
It's like an anchor,
Yeah.
and you're trying to fly.
Yeah.
And then the last one is work, right? If your work isn't something that fans the fire, then you end up in this really uncomfortable space and place.
Yeah.
And so The magic is turning down the stress
Yeah.
so that you can then focus on your health, so that you don't have to give up all the wealth that you create on the backside of that health when you're trying to actually have significance. And I just watch people do things out of order all the time. They're like, oh, I'm gonna be prosperous, and they make all the money, and then their health is trash. So then they have to spend all the money on the health,
For sure.
and then they're trying to build the money back and or the wealth back or the prosperity back. And so they never actually get to the place where everybody's truly seeking, which is significance. Everybody wants their life to matter.
Yes.
And if you're not actually doing work that makes your life matter, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. And so imagine finding fulfillment in a low stress world where you have the use of your energy, you have time to do it, and you have the treasures that you need in order to fund it, and you're in the best health of your life.
I will say
Who doesn't want
that,
that?
yeah, I will say that in the 2 years since I've left corporate fully, I left with an autoimmune on the back of almost dying from burnout, on the back of a toxic work environment with a boss that yelled at us. I mean, you name it, it happened. And when I walked away, so to cut 2 years later, clean blood work, autoimmune, almost in remission. My hair is growing back. I mean, my hair was like drop. I mean, your body will let you know when shit is hitting the fan, like in a way that is irrevocable. And my marriage is in better shape because instead of just coexisting, we sit down once a year now and we say, what is our vision for this relationship? We create vision boards and we create strategic objectives for our business all the time, right? And never for the one or two single most imperative partnerships in our life in terms of who are we as a unit, what are our goals as this unit, and then how do we row the boat in the same direction. And the quality of our marriage, and we were friends first and married now, so I would say in each other's circuit for 30 years. The quality of our relationship in the last 2 to 3 years has been exponentially more enriching because of the way that we are present. And we're talking about relationships, the way that we are present for each other and giving each other what the other person needs, and to your point, not what we want. And also not feeling resentful if it's lopsided, i.e. one person's the giver, one person's the taker, because we just didn't do the work to figure out how do we create equilibrium in that relationship. And I think that people, not to besmirch coaching, I'm a coach, you're a coach, right? At the end of the day, you can swing a cat now and you'll hit a coach, right? Like everybody seems to be calling themselves a coach. But I think that people's transformation and what they say after they've left a program where you really have changed their life, I mean, that's the sauce, right? Like that is a true culmination of making a difference in a way that I know for me personally, my coaches and the person I am now and the work that I'm doing now is changing generations in my family, right? But also in the people that have, to some extent, unplugged their own selves from the matrix and they're doing the hard work. Like none of this is easy. And I think, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on this. I think people think this is easy work. Change is easy. And nobody said change is, we were like, yeah, change is hard and we say it, but changing oneself and having integrity with oneself and recognizing our stupid patterns and moving beyond it and sometimes feeling like you're back at square one is hard. And you have to want it relentlessly for it to work.
It is not easy. It
Right.
is not easy work. And so probably better said for me, it's not comfortable work,
I love that.
right? But if you have a
But it's
tugging on your
worthy. It's
heart,
worthy work.
it's 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 necessary for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you have a tugging on your heart, right, and you ignore it or you're not listening to it, it will eventually force you into the work. The question is, are you going to do it on your terms or are you going to be forced to do it? I'm the type of person who wants to do it when I want to do it.
Yeah.
So but you got to know that the whisper becomes a louder, and every time that you don't listen, it becomes louder until it eventually hits you on the forehead with the 2x4.
Oh yeah, I
If you
had the whole
don't
truck
listen.
like roll over me multiple times, and my lesson was hard. And I use myself as an example with no compunction that you don't want to be me. Do you know what I mean? Like you have an opportunity to really change the trajectory of whatever it is you're trying to do in a way that, to your point, some people, I have a really good friend. She was 52 and battled cancer for the last 2 years and passed away October 14th. And I'm still processing that because she came out of the Matrix, if you will, wrote a book, was on the ride of her life professionally, and then boom, 2 years later, not even. I was hanging up, she used to collect the wine corks from bottles and make Christmas decorations with them. It was so cute. I decorated my Christmas tree and I hung her ornament like right in the front. And it just was such a powerful visual reminder that our time isn't guaranteed, right? Like none of this is, we're not entitled to live to 83. So what are we doing at this point, and how are we going to make those changes? Before we head out, like if you had to give listeners either one big thing or three tiny things to consider in this season, coming into 2025, a lot of people do the whole, oh, I'm going to be a better person and I'm going to have these, resolutions. I don't aspire to that, but definitely it is a nice clean slate for most people. What advice would you give them after listening to this if they also are feeling that intuition and that slow beat of, I want something different. I just don't know how to begin.
Reach out to Stacey and see if she has any room in her program to support you on the journey. That's the most direct way. It's the fastest way. It's the most efficient way. But if you're like, I'm not ready for that, or, I'm not sure if I can make that investment, then I think one of the things that you can do to get more in alignment with what you feel like you should be doing is to take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of it, and on the left-hand side, write more of, on the right-hand side, write less of, and just do a brain dump of the activities that you want to do more of and the ones that you want to do less of. And then come up with a plan for how you're going to do more of and less of other things. And I will guarantee you that your life will improve dramatically by doing less of the things you don't want to do and doing more of the things that you want to do.
I love that. That's so implementable. And who doesn't have a freaking sheet of paper and a pen, right? And know how to draw a line.
You can do it on your phone for all I care.
You can
right?
right? Do it on a napkin.
Seeing the stuff side by side is a game changer.
Yes, it's a different. It's not floating around in your head like some abstract thing. Jerome, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and sort of the work that you do in the world? And also, I know you have a podcast. Please let them know how they can plug into you.
Yeah, so our podcast is called Your Next, and podcast listeners listen to the podcast. So check out Your Next. It's available on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. And then if you want to learn more about me, hey, man, let's connect on LinkedIn. We post something every day, and it'd be great to come connect with you and get to know you a little bit better and see where you are on your journey and how we might be able to help you exit your matrix.
I love that. Thank you so much. So today we learned quite a number of things, but the three things that I think, I was just taking mental notes, but one of it was embracing an exit as a transformation and not necessarily an ending. Redefining success in a way that suits you, right? Less so of the traditional trappings. Maybe it's impact, maybe it's fulfillment, maybe it's legacy, maybe it's personal health, but redefine what that means to you personally, and don't just sit in pocket with it and stay in the status quo with that. And building clarity and resilience by addressing doubts with self-awareness and vulnerability. I really appreciated our conversation, Jerome, around how Jerome, the human, processed the layoffs of other people and having to execute that decision that didn't align to your core values and who you are as a human and how you want to be seen in the world. I think that there's no good and bad guys. There's just the human experience. And we've all experienced bad things. It's what the comeback looks like. And being in control of that comeback, I think, is what makes the difference. So if today's conversation inspired you, please join us in Beyond the Quo. Follow me on social media. Share your reflections. If this episode resonated with you, please share with a friend. And if you want to explore more of Jerome's work, you just totally find him on LinkedIn, Jerome Myers. And you've already done the quo. Now it's time to go beyond. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Jerome.